Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's great also to see like so many survivors on a Friday afternoon, actually, after so many talks and like intensive talks as well, particularly. So, as you guessed from the title, today I'm going to talk a little bit about some scary stories. More or less, let's say. So let's dive right into the topic as it was already being introduced. And I want to start with this. Ethereum is a dark forest. So even though the term MEV was coined back more than 6 years ago and earlier than this, it actually became very popular only with this article, which was like written by the guys at Paradigm, and I invite you all to read it because it's super interesting and super exciting. Even though we're talking about some years ago still proof of work on Ethereum, so completely different landscape. And actually, what's happening in this article is that the comparison of Ethereum to a dark forest, which for those of you who don't know, the dark forest is the hypothesis that technologically advanced civilization actually tries to hide themselves in order to prevent detection by other parties, and so that they can guarantee their survival. And long story short of the article was basically the article was talking about an attempt to recover some funds on a protocol. It was discovered vulnerable, but the authors were really aware of what was happening in the mempool back then. So there was mostly just public mempools back then, and so every transaction was visible. And so they tried to hide this transaction with the goal to prevent being front-run by other bots. Long story short, that attempt was not successful, and so we got a lesson, which is actually, it is there. So don't rely on normal infrastructure. So after this article, there were many follow-ups, many debates about how we actually achieve an ecosystem which is protected from this kind of threat, and we can prevent front running. Because remember, MEV is not just about arbitrage, as many people talk, but it's about many other things. It's liquidation, it's front running, and so on. And so many people talk about private mempools. So they introduced feature of private mempools in some certain mining pool back then, but it was only until these guys came into picture that they actually set up a clear path forward. And I will skip very quickly through the story of it, but basically, very fast forward to today, we now have a PBS, and it's still the Flashbots guy that are basically leading the way toward the vision of the ecosystem. And what is PBS? For those of you who doesn't know, PBS stands for Proposer-Builder Separation, and it's a concept in Ethereum that aims at separating the proposers, which are the validators, from the actual builders. And you see, this is the complete architecture of the PBS ecosystem, which is now implemented via MEV Boost, which is a software developed by the Splashbot guys. So to explain you how it works very quickly, a regular user normally sends a transaction to the public mempool, and now there are still these bots, MEV bots around there, which are called searchers, that actually look for this transaction and still try to sometimes front run you. So this is still the case. This is still happening. And what happens is that at the end they send this transaction to these entities that are called builders. And they are the ones that run very expensive machines, and they are responsible to basically build blocks for the entire Ethereum ecosystem. And there are a few of them, obviously, it's not just one, but not so many. And once they have this block produced, they actually try to produce a block which is optimized in terms of profits. They try to maximize the profit for both the builders themselves and the validators. So then they send the block through some relays, and the relays via MEV Boost, which is a sidecar software of the validator client, everything gets included in chain. And so here in this picture, it's also very important, the relays are basically the trusted intermediaries of the architecture. So basically, they guarantee that the builder are producing valid blocks, the validated blocks, and they also make sure that the validators are not stealing those blocks. So they're really the trusted piece in the architecture. And so what happened so why am I telling you this? It's because like nowadays with this builder setup, we also have, like you see there's like a new concept of private order flow, which is like really, really powerful, and I think not everyone is still aware of. So that's why I'm actually having this presentation. And let's say a user which is aware of this MEV threat actually can use can send bundles of transaction directly to this builder, which is called, also referred to as a builder RPC. And in this situation, so basically we are bypassing completely the mempool. We are just sending transaction to the builders, which by themselves keep them private and send them to the chain. So now here comes one of the scary story. And I might ask you here, to all of you, so come on, raise your hand, like, what do you think is more decentralized? Ethereum, do you think is Ethereum more decentralized than Bitcoin? Come on, raise everyone the hands. There you go. Okay, so Bitcoin is still more decentralized. We look at some charts. So the very good thing about this new PBS architecture is indeed that you see on your left, PBS architecture was very much used since the proof of stake introduction, since the merge, and it like all the more than 90% of the block were actually built through this PBS new architecture, because there's still some percentage of blocks that are built through normal vanilla builder that they try to build block themselves. It's just like solo stakers running the whole thing themselves. And the relay scenario, so it's pretty diverse. So there are, as I was saying before, there are like a few relayers, but it's quite fragmented. What is instead like a little bit scary and concerning is the other chart on the right. There you see actually the share of the builders that are actually building blocks on Ethereum. And I guess you can read that pretty well. Like if you zoom in at nowadays, there are basically 2 block builders dominating the entire Ethereum ecosystem. And there's good and bad. Like these guys are running very powerful software, and the entire PBS architecture was set up because of this, because they wanted to have builders running powerful infrastructure, and everyone instead like running validators being able to do it at home. Obviously, this is not possible for everyone to run such complex infrastructure. So this is the tendency, and it's particularly concerning because, I'll tell you, one of the 2 is actually censoring transaction. And one more thing, they're actually engaging, we've seen in other talks, so it's not a new concept because a lot of people already talk about this. And these builders sometimes are actually building blocks by subsidizing the blocks, meaning they're actually producing blocks at their own losses, with the goal of actually increasing their share, because more blocks produce, searchers go to them, and so the more share they have, the more share they gain, and so on. But anyway, this was just one short story and side story. Let's look at some nicer metrics. User side, builder RPC. So we've seen, let aside like glitch in the chart, because these are very difficult metrics to collect. But we've seen an increase in utilization of private transaction, meaning like those transactions that are funneled through this PBS schema. And if you were wondering about inclusion time, which is like if you have understood how the architecture looks like, might be the most concerning part for a user. Actually, we see inclusion time is really not a problem. Normally, transaction gets included within at most 2 blocks. But so you might be asking, why am I telling you all of this? So I just want to give you a perspective from what the institutions are looking at, and also like in particular us as Signum Bank. So we've said actually there are good things about these builder RPCs, and these are the 4 basic ingredients, which are very powerful. So we're talking about bundles, meaning the possibility of sending atomic bundles transaction that gets included within a single block. Talking about possibility of canceling transaction for free on chain, which is something that was not existent for the more tech-savvy view. You might know that to cancel a transaction on Ethereum, you actually have to send another transaction invalidating the previous one. Here, you have it for free, and it also comes with, you can also expire transaction, for example. Another important thing is reverse protection, meaning if a transaction is meant to fail on chain by using this builder RPC, it's not going to get included in the block. And the last thing is privacy. Yes, we talk about it, and which means until the transaction is included, no one except the builder has the possibility to see it. And so we have our basic ingredients. Let's make our pizza with those. So what can we do with this? Like, for example, let's stay on the trivial side of things. Very simple stuff, UX improvements. So, and this is particularly important because when I talk about institution, I talk about entities with, let's say, high-grade security and some sort of automation that I can actually operate on wallets in this case. And UX improvements are particularly interesting because you can now, with this setup, execute operating on a protocol, executing an action in one single action instead of, I guess you know, by interacting with MetaMask, when you interact with a protocol, you have to always approve, wait, send, and then click buy or sell, or maybe approve multiple times. Super annoying. Very natural, sponsored transaction. So now that we can create a bundle, we also can create a bundle with transaction of different nature, so we can actually have one sponsor wallet to pay for the transaction fees for another executor. So that basically we can have like wallets that trade or transfer like ERC20s, whatever USDC, without having to worry about Ethereum at all. And this is actually particularly important for us, and it's something we are proud of. And why I'm saying this, because if you guys don't know what Signum Bank is doing, we are very known for our offering, which is one part of our core value proposition, which are segregated wallets. What does it mean? That each client has its own wallet, and they can see it clearly on chain. So very simple, and actually clients love it because of its simplicity. So because they can go on chain and they're sure that funds are not commingled with each other. And that's why, so this obviously is a very good feature, but also comes at a cost for us, because we have to manage a lot of wallets for all the clients, and we have to come up with some efficient mechanism to actually manage those wallets. So that's why we're really interested in this, let's say, off-chain feature, which come with, for example, the builder RPCs that I'm describing now. And yeah. So I guess it's something to look on. In my opinion, whatever is being built off-chain nowadays is actually becoming a lot more important and fundamental than whatever is happening on-chain, because on-chain is being built very slow, while off-chain is very, very dynamic, so keep an eye on that. Moving forward, limit orders of the MMM. I know that some MMMs have the capability of defining limit orders, but with this setup, you can basically do limit orders without actually having to worry about protocol-specific features, because you can send a transaction, making sure it only executes upon certain conditions, and if not, it won't be included. So you keep on retrying until your order goes through. Last but not least, instance settlement. So in the same way, with bundle transaction, we also can interact with different protocols at the same time, trade on one side, buy on one side, sell on the other. At the same time, no risk in changing rates. So I'm just showing you that we can reduce a lot the risk of interacting with on-chain protocols by using these features. Okay, this looks different than expected, but anyway, I'll recap it very quickly for you. We looked at some technical metrics around this builder RPC, and we just assessed transaction speed, which is the first item. I guess you don't see it. And we basically understood that we saw it before. It depends mostly on the network share in the setup, but we're confident that by selecting appropriately the builders you want to route your transaction through, the transaction can go in fairly quickly. In terms of scalability, builders are really not the bottleneck here. It's the EVM, because builders are super powerful machine. And cost. The third point is cost. Batching can actually reduce cost because you can run strategies that can be optimized. While if you just submit transaction to the mempool and you just wait for their inclusion, you might not know what actually you're spending. Here, instead, you can predict it well ahead. In terms of reliability, again, these builders are designed for profit maximization. They will be up. And the last but not least, it's privacy. One is private by design, the other is not. So we come to the conclusion here. And so one thing that we can say is that this PBS architecture, at least from an institutional perspective, is very robust and stable. We see there is indeed an adoption, an increasing adoption of private transaction, which is also, on one side, a good sign. This builder RPC unlock very new use cases. Building off-chain, as I said, I stress out again, generally yields faster result and with much lower complexity. Like think about ERC 4337 for account abstraction. It's still not very clear where it's going, to be honest. Obviously, there are some open points. There are some cons to think of because like builders in this setup are kind of centralized entity, but there's no legal contract in place. So this is very concerning from institution perspective, but we believe that with the right setup and with the right risk mitigation procedure, we can actually accept the risk. And this is a concern not for institution, but for Ethereum Foundation, that this builder centralization is a much bigger concern practically than whatever validator decentralization, but because like a lot of time they talk about decentralizing validators, but we've seen we might have like some bigger problems on the builder side. So there are more stuff coming on very soon, so unfortunately I didn't have time to talk about all the innovation, so ePBS or Suave. It's just that all this stuff is still being discussed and progress is like moving quite slowly in general. And also we are aware of Vector Upgrade, which actually finally bring on-chain some of the features I discussed about, but just to refrain that from an institutional perspective, this is what is the standard now, what is solid and fully functional. And so basically as institution, we normally rely on software that's been running, been battle tested, and been up for a long time. So anyway, watch out also for those upgrades. And with that, I conclude my presentation. So.
Thank you very much, Samuel. I think we have time maybe for one question. Yeah.
Do you have smart contract accounts for your clients or externally?
So our clients, no, we have externally owned accounts for, as if you refer to segregated wallets, we do have smart contracts as part of our offering, but it doesn't, there's nothing to do with what I described today. Yes. Yeah. Right. We actually have one smart contract for that purpose. Yeah. But it's not a client's account in that case. So.
Thank you. We'll take just one more question and then we will close.
So
Your presentation was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
But I think everyone should be shocked and horrified by what he actually said. Just to summarize, sophisticated bots are stealing money from normal users. And the solution was that we don't rely on normal infrastructure. That's horrible. The solution is that we have this out-of-protocol solution where we introduce trusted intermediaries, and that leads to more centralization and things like payment for order flow. These go against everything we stand for in Ethereum.
I just want to say that I'm here presenting facts, not opinions.
So my question for you is, since you presented the Band-Aid approach, an out-of-protocol solution, what might be an in-protocol solution to the problem of malicious MEV?
So, I mean, there's this EPBS concept, which I unfortunately didn't have time to go through. And, I mean, I am not part of the discussion in the Ethereum Foundation, so I'm not actually 100% sure of the evolution there. But yes, I see there are some good thoughts around it, and then the idea is basically to propose a block which actually gets included within with a certain delay. That, for example, can bring some benefits. And but again, like, the discussion is still really ongoing. It's still very early, and for me, the important point here is that just a call to action, that we should think more and more about these problems and try to address it.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And that reminds me also the discussion we had before on the panel about the spectrum of decentralization, right?
Yeah.
So it's not black or white, so it's important to discuss it. So thanks a lot. Samuele Rodi, I think we learned a lot.
Thank you.